get your gun, get your gun, get your gun.
The 12th of July 1915 was a day that would completely alter the course of William Charles Tucker's life. It was the day that he finally decided to enlist in the Australian Army, following his mates to help with the war effort. Australia, having been federated a mere 13 years before the war broke out, had something to prove. However, many young Australian men still put their hands up to go and fight, perhaps inspired by wartime propaganda and maybe even peer pressure. William Charles Tucker being one of them.
William was born in 1896 to Margaret and James Douglas Percy Tucker. He was the third of 4 children born in Norwood, South Australia. He was particularly close with his younger sister Mabel, who wrote fondly of him in his memoirs, describing him as her special friend. William was only 19 and living with his parents on Grant Avenue, Rose Park East, when he enlisted to fight in the First World War. He was a private in the Australian Imperial Force and Australian Infantry and was a part of the 32nd Battalion. His service number was 1581.
After his enlistment, William and the rest of his battalion travelled to Suez to train for the upcoming battle. Subsequently, the 32nd Battalion travelled to Ismailia and then to Alexandria, remaining in Egypt and training for 10 months. On the 23rd of June, 1916, the 32nd Battalion journeyed to Marseille, from here making their way to Fromelles, where the battle that took the lives of so many young Australians would occur.
Fromelles was a small French country town. It had been captured by the German infantry in 1914. The battle held there in 1916 was the first major wartime battle fought by the Australian troops on the Western Front. The attack against the German army was known as the Sugarloaf Salient. The plan of attack was an attempt to draw out German troops away from the Somme offensive, another ongoing battle further south. The intensive 7-hour attack carried out by the Germans delayed and had diminished the hope of any successful surprise attack. This was conclusively proved as an inadequate attempt in conquering the well-entrenched defenders.
When the troops of the 5th Australian and 61st British Divisions began the attack at 6 p.m. on the 19th of July 1916, they were met with heavy fire and endured mental and physical strain at the hands of the abundant German machine gunners. By 8 a.m. the next morning, the battle was declared over, and the grim reality of the previous day's losses had settled in on both sides of the battlefront. The 5th Australian Division suffered a devastating 5,533 casualties, with the 61st British Division suffering the loss of 1,547 British soldiers. All of these men had lives and families, and the loss of life on such a large scale left a hole in the hearts of so many that could never be filled.
The attack was an exhaustive, ghastly failure as the Germans came to the realization within a few hours it was merely a deceptive move against them. Therefore, it had no real impact upon the progress of the Somme offensive, the main purpose of the attack on Fromelles. William Charles Tucker was a member of the 32nd Battalion during the battle and had experienced the first major battle for the 3rd Battalion firsthand, despite the fact they only just entered the trenches 3 days prior to the engagement of attack.
William Charles Tucker fought in the Battle of Fromelles on the 19th of July. He suffered extreme injuries and subsequently passed away on the 20th of July at the young age of 20. He was listed as missing on this day and assumed to be a prisoner of war until reported to be dead on the 4th of November 1916. The cause of death listed on his death certificate was killed in action.
One can only imagine how a young man might feel, watching all of his friends and peers venture out into the battlefield, like lambs to the slaughter, knowing that soon enough he would be in their position. One can only imagine what this young man would be feeling as he was dragged off the battlefield, gravely injured, and how he would feel lying in a cot surrounded by injured mates.
It wasn't until December 15, 1916, when both Margaret and James Douglas Percy Tucker had received the devastating news that their son had been killed in the war. Just over a year later, in October of 1917, they were informed that another one of their sons, James Tucker, had also died of his injuries in France. Mabel, sister of James and William, said, "We later received a photo of James' grave. What cut deeper was that we had no photo of darling Bill's grave."
Further excavations and DNA testing in 2009 finally verified his identity. In 2010, Private William Charles Tucker was laid to rest with hundreds of other soldiers whose identities had been discovered. This was an extremely significant event, not only for the living descendants of Private Tucker, but all of Australia. Names were finally put to the faces of our unknown heroes, and the families of all these young brave men received closure on what happened to their sons, brothers, partners, and friends. William's name is located at panel 121 in the commemorative area at the Australian War Memorial.